Hello, folks. Welcome back to Reblog. If you are new to the series, this is where I talk through a blog post I had written earlier in the week, usually about mental health, mood disorders, and developmental disability. I have a terrible memory, so this gives me a chance to kind of expand on topics as well as add new ones in a different format. Anyway, let's talk about something that affects most, if not every autistic person/person with autism, and that is issues with different types of stimulation. With that, we'll also be touching on the subjects of tics as well. You can see the little wire over my shoulder. Anyway, it is useless making a blanket statement in how stimulation affects each person on the spectrum, as we all are so vastly different and experience the world differently than, each person with autism, plain and simple. We're all very different. Negative audio stimulation may be perceived differently in my brain than in someone else with autism. I have also met many people with no issues when it came to something that I struggle with a lot, that is wet clothes. And while that is the absolute bane of my existence, and this wire is slowly here. Y'all can see it anyway. There you go. Anyway, returning to audio stimulation for a second, let us elaborate on that a bit more. When I say those words, I mean any sounds that may be produced in our environment. I have an oddly vivid memory of something, and that it's odd because my memory is garbage, like I just said, of an educational film that they showed us in autism, in elementary school in class, about autism. And there was one part where they had kind of a static shot of a school cafeteria. And it was something like, this is how us normal people would hear this room. And then they suddenly cranked that volume up past the holy shit gauge. And which, again, is crazy to me because you would think that at least one person in each of these classrooms will have autism. So you would think that maybe not suddenly cranking the volume is such a good idea. And I actually have this problem. This problem is like a lot. It's very pervasive in media in general. We just rewatched Hannibal, and I completely forgot that they made like the main character on the spectrum. And like there are that show's an odd one because there are some things that are like, haha, like I feel like aren't said enough in media, but then there are like a lot of tropes and things that are like, okay, but you just like wanted to be that hip, like we know about this stuff, but then you're doing these things. And one of those things is the intense volume difference in between talking, dialogue, anything like that, and just anything they want to do, whether it's like action sounds or random background tracks or just like crazy sound effects they want to do over visuals. But then it's always very sudden and it's always very jarring. That is my cat. But that's my off topic about Hannibal there. We could dissect that for a while, but anyway, they told us in this educational piece, this is how autistic people perceive the room. And I was so confused because that's not how I perceive a room. Like that's just not how I perceive a room. People, do not get me wrong. That is how some people intake sounds. However, defining that as the singular answer leads to stigma. For me, voices are actually incredibly quiet, and this actually plays into my CAP. Sorry, if you're not aware of CAP, it's Central Auditory Processing Disorder, and that basically just means that I have issues deciphering different sounds. If I'm not focusing, I can have especially issues understanding language. Um, so voices are usually very quiet for me, and sounds with heavier bass or certain tones. That's what can overstimulate me. For an example, if somebody coughs in a small room beside me, if they cough into the wall to their side, or if they like cover their cough, it won't bother me. The sound, I should say. When it is covered, what's wrong, buddy? Sorry, Elaine wanted attention. When it is uncovered, towards me or even like facing the wall we both face, it can overstimulate me depending on how loud it is, and how much bass is in the cough. So even like something like that can like just overwhelm me for a second. Just when something overstimulates me to a point like this, my entire train of thought kind of brutally derails, and I need to take a couple seconds to reboot. Um, many of sorry, Many of us also have issues with certain frequencies that others can't hear. The lights used in schools and offices, and also in old CRT TVs, are two examples that produce like kind of a buzzing sound that isn't bad at first, but over time, and if you're spending your whole day in school, um, it gets really grating on the ears. So, therefore, I am a very strong advocate. This is a, I kind of go into a rant here in the post, but this is, I do want to focus on this. I am a strong advocate for allowing students to listen to music during exams and test settings. Sorry about it, but I don't think it's an unfair advantage. I don't think it's cheating to allow students to use tools that allow them to succeed. Some students have absolutely no problem with background noise, and that's great. That's great for you. But when any noise tends to distract you from your paper, how is it unfair to use a tool to make sure that you can just focus on your paper? It's not like the music's giving the answers. It's okay, well, I can just focus on my paper and think. Um, and I have no problem with someone using headphones and music to help them focus. I was often accused a lot by other students and even teachers of trying to cheat because I needed a distraction like that to focus. Um, my train of thought gets derailed really easily, like you've seen in these videos right here. Um, and it always got derailed by the sounds of other students fidgeting, which we all have to fidget. That's not a problem. I'm just saying the sound of it derails my thoughts. People walking and talking in the hallways, cars on the streets outside, people outside, random school building sounds, and the freaking buzzing of those damn hallway and classroom lights. And I just get told, well, just take the test in another room. That's it. That's the answer. As if that didn't only get rid of one of the overstimulation factors. And that's even if you somehow manage to find an empty classroom at any given time in a school. And the thing is, often you're still being put in a classroom with like less students, but that's still like those are still the factors are still there. So by moving me into another space, you're not only like taking up my test time, but also not dealing with the issues at hand. I don't know. If someone really wants to cheat on their tests, exams, they are just going to do it. By adding headphones and music into the equation, we are not going to suddenly be hooligans up late at night recording answers into MP3 files and just so we can get like high scores on our math tests. No, it would not be worth the effort at all. Moving on to physical stimuli, It is a little bit more nuanced, for me at least. I cannot talk for the wider community, but I do see the same sentiment a lot. And honestly, shopping for clothes is a nightmare. There are other things related to this topic, but let us start with this first because this is like my biggest thing. Um, it really is not as simple as find a size that you are and find a few materials you like. Not all clothes, first of all, are created the same size, which is ridiculous. Like, I mean, a size should be like if two sizes are the same size, they should just be the same size. I don't know. That's just me. Um, I mean, it's not just me. Like, there's a lot of people like that. um, but they also have small differences that don't usually bother non-autistic people. These can be like seam placement and material, minor shape differences, and how thick the material actually is. Physical stimuli are what I personally struggle with the most out of all stimuli. I wear very few clothes, and always laughed extra hard when I was a kid at those cartoon characters when they opened their closets and they just had a row of clothes that looked exactly the same because, boom, that was me. um, the problem is, often when I can find clothes that fit all these criteria, they end up being really expensive. That is why when I do find clothes like this, I will only buy one or two things at a time and kind of take remarkably good care of them. Um, as you've seen in these videos already, I'm like, damn, I've already cycled through all of my clothing combinations. Uh, but like that's just how it is, you know. Um, when I'm wearing something that overstimulates me, it will be the only thing that I can focus on. As much as I can try to do deep breathing exercises, as much as I can go to my happy place, every thought in my mind is going to be fix the hell out of this. And if it is mixed with other stimuli, it can make me spiral even more, admittedly. Um, Physical stimuli don't end with clothes, though. No. It can really be anything that we can physically feel based off the name. Um, I know that is not a satisfying explanation, but that truly is the best way of saying it. Um, let's say having something sticky, dry, or irritating on your hand. I hate having sticky hands, and I don't care, but as long as the water is clear, I am tossing my hands in it. And I am getting whatever the hell is on my hands off of my hands. It truly feels like the sticky feeling on my hand is slowly leaking under my skin and is ripping it up from the inside, which for obvious reasons becomes the only thing I can think about. I also worked for a while in charge of bulk spices at the store I was working at, which was fun, but filling some of those things was like spilling a nightmare cloud. I always kept wet cloths on me through my shifts, just so I could immediately clean my hands. Um, Wet clothes are another example. They add to the clothes stimuli. Um, or even having kind of wet skin and having to completely air dry. That's why people always make fun of my shower times, but it's because I have an extremely specific air dry and towel dry ratio to ensure my skin feels as perfect as possible. Um, if not, it truly feels like my entire body is pruning, and it is even worse when wet clothes. Sorry, it is even worse with wet clothes because they just keep re-wetting your skin. So you already feel your skin pulling and tugging and drying up, and then it's like splash. And it's just the feeling over and over. Not only that, but the way they sit on your skin, it truly feels like there's no difference between your skin and the clothes anymore. And all you know is you need to rip it all off, skin and all. I know everyone has physical stimuli that they don't like, but the truth is that it most likely isn't to the degree that we are feeling it. While it is nice to empathize with these things, be careful not to belittle the issues or deny that the problem is any worse than what you can feel. There is no rational part of me when physical stimuli get too much. And that is why I stay incredibly careful in avoiding these problems. All right, here's a bonus stimuli that I didn't write down before, and I thought right after I released it, and that's how it goes, I guess. But that is food stimuli, which kind of takes from like a lot of different senses. But I wanted to talk about it a bit more because it's something that is very important to people with autism. And it is something that we get a lot of crap for and get told that we're picky eaters because of like issues that we have with food. Now, I will say anybody who knows me will say that I'm a fairly adventurous eater. I do try to eat as much as I can and as like just I love trying new things. I love trying different things. And so I don't consider myself a picky eater, but there are things that are related to food with textures, with smells, with certain tastes that just don't click well for me. So when I am cooking, when I do get food, obviously like anybody else, I avoid these things. The difference is that these things can be overwhelming for us, and a lot of the time, there are autistic people that are just told, oh well, like, you'll get hungry enough eventually, and they won't eat for like a long time, like, because it's not an issue with just being picky. This isn't just, well, I don't want it. This is, I physically, because of the stimuli, I cannot get it down my throat. And to force it, I will, So that brings up, some people just have a couple things that they have to avoid at all costs. There are some people that are restricted to something called same foods, which are very similar foods prepared certain ways that have to have certain ingredients maybe, but these foods are kind of all that you can stomach. So that, I mean, it's still also important I will say it is important to get nutrition in there as well. Try to find like vegetables that aren't, because I mean there's like a huge range of fruits and vegetables, so I'm like there are so many things that I love in like that I never even thought I would because it's like, oh, I like vegetables, but I love cooking with vegetables now. So it's really just finding your balance and finding what works best for you, and for if you're cooking for somebody or getting food for them, what works best for them. Anyway, so that's food stimuli. I just wanted to quickly talk about that. The final stimuli that I want to talk about today is social stimuli. This one really has some of the most public stigma out of all of them, and that is mostly connected to autism. Different people across the spectrum will face this to varying degrees, and some people can handle social situations better than others. And there's nothing wrong with being able to handle more or less social stimuli. For example, I am personally more socially strong and consider myself fairly well-spoken and introspective. That is why I do these videos for everyone, in a way to educate people and be a voice in the community, that is able, be one of the voices in the community that can speak out and can fight for better lives for everyone. And that's great. But I also have a time limit on how long I have out of my safe zone. Um, some people genuinely take less energy, or sorry, less social energy than others to hang out with. Um, and that's usually has something to do with how accepting they are of people with disabilities. And chipping away at my social energy tank is not an insult at all. Everyone who isn't me takes some level of social energy from me. That's just a fact. That's not a negative to anybody. Um, so don't worry if you hear that. The more people in a situation as well, oh God, I used the wrong two there. The more people in a situation, the more stressful it can be. The thing is, the opposite can also be true. And I am often super uncomfortable one-on-one with people because there's just so much pressure on you to not blow your half of the interaction. 3 is a crowd, but it is also a perfect crowd for this autistic man. Well, I mean, 3 to 5. And I feel like the social sweet spot is that, where everyone has a chance to contribute, but there's no major pressure in one individual person. And that kind of takes some of the social stress out of it. There's, of course, a social wall that I hit. And even if I am good at masking, it does not mean it is immensely it's not mean that it's immensely wearing on my mental health the longer I am out past that wall. So I'm able to kind of mask when I'm starting to. I'm able to mask when I'm starting to get past that point, but it takes a lot out of me. I'm usually pretty good at telling where my wall is, but sometimes it can catch me off guard, especially if there are external factors, or if my bipolar just wants to say hi. If you see me hit my wall socially, and I try to head out, most likely it is not something you did, and more often it's just that I hit my wall. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. So don't think that like you did something to make me hit my wall. Usually, that's not the case. Unfortunately, when I do get overstimulated, it can have adverse effects on myself and my actions. There's kind of a nuance to this as well. Boom, autism as nuance. Statement of the year. Because it truly also depends on our state of mind when overstimulated, the type of stimuli, and how we specifically handle the stimuli. Usually when I get overstimulated and somebody asks me questions, or I try to speak with urgency to someone, I can lose control of my volume and tone. This doesn't mean that I just get overstimulated and yell at people. What can happen is I have like a slightly raised volume, and I'm told that I can have a hostile tone with that. These are rarely my intention, and often if I get called out on it now, I'm better with catching it right away. The problem before was I was always just told I'm yelling at someone or just being an ass, and I would get defensive because in the moment I wouldn't realize my outward tone and it wouldn't be actually brought up. I will say for overstimulation though, as far as physical stimuli, the longest record of sticky hands was the last bit of a date once. I was holding our ice cream, specifically DQ Blizzards, while we walked to the park and had nowhere at the park to wash my hands. I thought there'd be like a water fountain, something at least. I impressed that woman so much that day. that eventually we got married. Oh, and it was our first date. The final thing I wanted to briefly touch on was tics. They're actions that most, if not all, people on the spectrum have. They can take many different forms, but for the sake of today's conversation, let's focus on their connection to stimuli. Even if somebody doesn't often have obvious tics, they can come out more and become stronger when faced with overstimulation and trying to avoid that brain train derailment. There we go. Got that word out. One example, you see in my videos a lot, I play with my hair. I noticed that I was doing it a little bit more today, so I threw in a hat, so I wouldn't have to worry about it the whole video. That's one. Some of the more famous and unfortunately often mocked tics that appear on the spectrum are often hand-related tics and rocking our bodies. I do both things, but often the latter only comes out when I'm extra overstimulated. These are self-soothing behaviors, and we should not be ashamed or shamed for doing them because they are healing behaviors. When I'm self-soothing, it is a chance for me to push the stimuli out of my brain or stave off negative feelings long enough to correct the stimuli. Now, don't get me wrong, I also have tics that can cause problems as well. For me, laughing is a tic that I learned very young. I actually can pinpoint where this started. It honestly started when I read something somewhere that it was harder to cry when you laugh. So here we are, many years later, probably like many years later, still laughing when I'm uncomfortable. I use laughing as a mechanism to kind of lighten uncomfortable situations for me and kind of detach myself from pain. I also have, like I just said, a terrible tic of messing with my hair. Moderation, it isn't so bad, but you have to be careful because if you keep doing it a lot, you're going to be ripping out your hair, and that's not a good thing at all. Now, I hope this all helped clear some more things up about stimuli, tics, and overstimulation. I wanted to start doing something in each of these videos. It is my quote of the day. I am either going to be finding a quote, I'm going to either be asking y'all for a quote, or I'm just going to be writing a quote myself and trying to be a fancy quotist. A quotable person, I don't know. So today is mine. It is just as dangerous to us long-term to masquerade as an ally publicly when you're unapologetically ableist and toxic behind the scenes. All you do is re-traumatize us and traumatize those who believe you to be a safe space and open themselves to you. Remember that today. Anyway, hope you have a fantastic and positively stimulating day.